Catholic Americans, and indeed Catholics throughout the world, find themselves divided over the presidency of Joseph Biden, every bit as much as we were divided over the presidency of Donald J. Trump. Many Catholics took issue with Trump's policies of economic protectionism and international disentanglement, seeing them as prioritizing short-sighted economic interests in the most prosperous nation on earth over those of humanity as a whole, interpreting Trump's intentions as promoting a xenophobic and even white supremacist nationalism. Others saw Trump as a champion of the common man, regardless of race, against the new globalist robber barons of big tech, international finance, and so on, as well as a voice of resistance to the steady march of neo-Marxist and postmodernist newspeak in the form of political correctness and woke cancel culture, all of which work against the interest of proclaiming and living the gospel. Just so, many Catholics see President Biden as a return to America's better nature, characterized by a willingness to forego our own immediate interests for the sake of the interests of weaker nations and the world's poor, whereby the United States acts as a responsible global citizen, equal in privilege to other nations, but more obliged because of our position of power and prosperity. By contrast, others see Biden as an aggressive advocate for the grave evils of the progressivist, meta-capitalist, and neo-Marxist left. With its oligarchy of cultural elites, cancellation, critical race theory, and gender theory, and most of all, its promotion of abortion as a quasi-sacrament of postmodernity. I'm Dr. Richard Bolzakelli, and I fall into that side of this divide. In this commentary, I can't address all the issues before us, so I'm going to focus specifically on the issue of abortion as it bears upon the presidency of Joseph R. Biden as the second Catholic president of the United States, according to his self-representation. Now, before we get started, if you want to hear more commentary like this one on a variety of topics that intersect with Catholic thought and teaching, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and select notifications of future content. Hitting the like button and sharing this video helps as well. President Joseph Biden used January 22nd, 2021, the anniversary of the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling on Roe v. Wade, to declare his intention to expand access to abortion, codify a right to abortion in federal law, appoint pro-abortion judges, and reverse the gains made over the decades by the pro-life movement, including the strides achieved in the previous 4 years under the presidency of Donald Trump, who, though not a Catholic, was recognized by many of his pro-life supporters as a veritable champion of the unborn. The Biden White House also removed and relegated to a historical archive Trump's proclamation on National Sanctity of Human Life Day for January 22nd, 2021, which Trump had published on January 18th while still in office. That's quite an about-face, and it's hard not to see it as a direct repudiation by the Biden administration of the claim Trump makes in his own proclamation, a claim any faithful Catholic would simply have to make. By this I mean that denying what Trump says in that proclamation, regarding it as a thing to be unsaid, as a thing one should not say, would be to derogate from the faith. Why so? Well, the content of Trump's proclamation can be summarized as follows. Human beings bear the image of God, their Creator. For that reason, human life is possessed of an intrinsic, objective value from the moment of conception, when God initiates the process of human development in an exercise of his own creative prerogative. On the basis of our intrinsic objective value, God issues an absolute moral prohibition against the direct and intentional killing of an innocent human being, which everyone is bound to obey. This moral prohibition imposes an obligation not only on individuals, but also on government, which must recognize in this matter of preeminent importance to the common good a responsibility owed to God. To deny this statement would be to adopt an objectively heretical stance vis-a-vis the absolute moral prohibition originating from the Creator against the direct and intentional killing of an innocent human being who bears the image of God in creation. Denying this statement would also mean rejecting the constant teaching and tradition of the Church as concerns the sacred duty of governments, never to work against that prohibition, but instead to apply it through the mechanism of law. I don't care if Joe Biden identifies as a devout Catholic pledging to bring decency back to politics. If the 2020 presidential election represented a struggle for the soul of America, then America didn't win that struggle with the inauguration of Joe Biden. His radical and aggressive posture on the matter of abortion alone precludes, in my opinion, such an assessment from a Catholic point of view. But the situation is especially concerning because it involves a president who represents himself as a Catholic while, I contend, apostatizing from the faith in the exercise of his office, even as the bishops are divided over what to do about it. It's a major scandal to the faith. So let me help. A government leader who intentionally promotes legislation and policy initiatives intended to make abortion more widely available is guilty under canon law as an accessory to procured abortion, and therefore subject to the same penalties under canon law as the person who has the abortion or the person who performs the abortion directly. I contend that this cooperation in Joe Biden's case rises to the level of what moralists call formal cooperation with grave evil. That means that what he does in the exercise of his office to promote abortion is morally equivalent to abortion itself. And the Catholic Church regards abortion as an offense incurring the penalty of excommunication, latae sententiae. Now, that basically means that the action itself excommunicates the person who performs it with no need of a formal legal process. And that's because, in this case, the inner logic of the act works against everything that being Catholic means. To perform this kind of act is to repudiate the Catholic faith in the process, even without writing or uttering a single word of explicit renunciation. Now, at this point, Catholic politicians who favor preserving and expanding abortion claim to be personally opposed to abortion, but unwilling to impose their personal beliefs on others, presumably because they don't think universally accessible knowledge of the moral law concerning abortion is possible, nor that civil law should ever be made on any other basis than universally accessible truth. Of course, that argument wouldn't explain why it's necessary to do absolutely everything to have as much abortion as humanly possible, and never mind that neither of these theses reflects the great patrimony of Catholic thinking on law and politics. The fact is that their own legislative and regulatory agenda on climate policy or COVID-19 contradicts them as well. The whole line of argument is simply indefensible. That criticism aside, however, on other grounds, the personally opposed but defense simply cannot save Biden here. Whatever dubious arguments might be advanced to absolve other public figures, such as Nancy Pelosi or Heidi Heitkamp, both of whom have voted to legalize late-term abortion, Biden's case is distinct because, as head of state, he's personally entrusted ex officio with particular discretion and specific powers. And he's exercising that very discretion, along with the executive power specific to his office, for the very purpose of encouraging more abortion. Consider the inner logic of his pledge, what must be true if his pledge is to have any objective meaning. Joe Biden wants women who would have abortions, but who can't get to a clinic where abortions are performed, to be able to get to such a clinic to have those abortions. He wants women who would have abortions if they could find a doctor to perform one, to find a doctor who performs abortions and procure those abortions at the hands of that doctor. He wants women who would have abortions, if they could afford to pay for them, to be relieved of that specific financial cost so they will actually have those abortions. He wants young girls who would have abortions if their parents wouldn't find out about them to keep their parents from finding out and thus to have those abortions they otherwise would not have procured. Biden can't say that he would regret that those women procured those abortions because in executing his stated objectives, he will have deliberately made sure that any disincentive or obstacle to those abortions was stripped away. He wants to confirm those women in their choice to have an abortion and to facilitate their abortions so they could have this specific and particular object of their choice, namely abortion. Joe Biden clearly intends those abortions. He's willfully and knowingly acting within the sphere of his own competency toward that very end. Biden's removal of Trump's proclamation that every human life deserves legal defense from the moment of conception leaves no room for an alternative interpretation of his actions. Since issuing his own statement on January 22nd and suppressing Trump's proclamation, President Biden has taken concrete actions in the exercise of his office consistent with what he declared he would do, including reversing the so-called Mexico City policy, which Donald Trump had reinstated, along with all the measures Trump had initiated to strengthen the spirit of that policy. For those who don't know, the Mexico City policy prohibited the distribution of U.S. funds for family planning programs to organizations that performed or promoted abortion. So, in the Mexico City policy, Joe Biden saw abortions going unperformed for lack of money and opened the American wallet to pay for them, so that going forward, such abortions would be performed. That's more than remote material cooperation. It's formal cooperation. And that's a standard we apply to heads of state concerning other cases involving the perpetration of direct and intentional grave evil. The Catholic critics of Donald Trump lamented that he'd sent refugees to their executioners and ripped children from the arms of their parents, but those were cases in which the goods sought and intended were those of the preservation of a regulated system of immigration and the security of a nation against nefarious actors like terrorists and traffickers of drugs and human beings. Disagree with him prudentially if you want. Critique the wisdom of his judgments. But if grave evils were perpetrated as a result of Trump's immigration enforcement policies, we have no good faith reason to believe that those evils, however regrettable, were directly intended by him. They weren't the direct object of Trump's policy. And so, Trump's actions as head of state in these matters didn't involve the commission of per se or intrinsic moral evil, but at most evil per accidens, or on account of something else external to his intentions and ancillary to his actions. Now, this commentary is really about Joe Biden, so let's not get distracted. I mention this example because the very same people who condemn Donald Trump as evil over his policies on immigration enforcement attempt to exempt Joe Biden from condemnation in the matter of abortion on the basis of the very same argument I just made in defense of Donald Trump. But it doesn't work. Because as I've already outlined, procured abortion is the direct object of Biden's abortion policies, which he advances without apology and by all accounts without remorse by his sustained and deliberate activity as head of state. Here's a closer analogy for Biden's policies on abortion. If a head of state oversaw a program of direct and intentional genocide, we would say that he or she had committed genocide, even if that person never directly killed anyone himself. He would be guilty of genocide because genocide occurred not only as a remote consequence of, but as the directly intended outcome of the policies that head of state had advanced, the program he supported, promoted, and commanded. That program had as its objective the direct and intentional killing of certain innocent persons who, absent the administration of that program, would not have been so killed. That's not true of Trump's immigration policies, but it is true of Biden's abortion policies. The details may differ, but the moral principle is exactly the same. Joe Biden is himself formally implicated in those particular abortions his policies were initiated to ensure. Abortion isn't the only objective grave evil in his campaign platform, but it's enough to warrant this harsh critique. Joe Biden ran on expanding the practice of abortion in the United States and abroad. The practice of directly and intentionally taking the lives of the innocent in their mothers' wombs. 2 days into his presidency, he pledged to America to make good on that promise, to make sure that no abortion goes unperformed if any woman wants one, as long as he has anything to say about it. And on that pledge, he's since begun the process of following through. This is formal cooperation in procured abortion, an act which incurs a penalty under canon law of excommunication late sententiae because it works against the gospel itself. It cuts against the very heart of the culture of life and the civilization of love the gospel calls Christians to promote and defend. Is that really the decency we were promised in a Biden presidency? So much for the soul of America. And so much for our second Catholic president. Now, again, if you like this commentary, please subscribe and hit the notification button. And do, of course, like and share this video. Thank you very much, and God bless.